Hello! I forgot that was up. Hello, everyone! Welcome to another Secrets of Eventide stream. Hi there, I am Jason Bullman. I am the Director of Game Design at Paizo and the creator of the Eventide setting. And what you just saw there was a sneak peek of something I want to show you a little later. It's one of the maps I'm working on for the upcoming adventure, but that's what we're here to talk about today. So, every Tuesday I do a stream talking about the process and the things that are available and the things that are coming out for the Eventide. Saturday, this is the day that once every, 2 weeks or so, we're going to gather together and talk about some of the secrets of the campaign. What's coming up, what I'm trying to accomplish, what's in the future. The last one of these we did looked at the cosmology of the Eventide setting, something I have not yet shared with a wider audience than this group right here. But today, what I'd like to do is take a look forward at the upcoming playtest adventure. So, the part of the big push here is to, get me to develop more of the world of Eventide. One of the best ways to do that is to play in it. And one of the ways that I want to do that is by running kind of an introductory adventure, an adventure that's designed specifically to look at the world, explore the world, and give the players a taste of what the world has to offer. So what I've been working on, what I've been designing, is this starter adventure. And well, honestly, I do things down to the wire here at Minotaur Games. So this adventure is being written this weekend into next week. I've already got a fair amount of it actually done. But I'm in the process of building maps and throwing together the final encounters and things like that, because the first playtest is this coming Thursday. So my time is running very, very short. So, why don't we dive right into it? What I want to do is kind of give an overview of what this adventure is going to contain. Kind of the general plot for what I'm calling, part one of the introduction here. And it's, this is designed to be something to give you a sense of the world. All told, it'll probably get the characters up to probably about third level would be my guess by the end of it. Maybe second, maybe third. It depends on how things kind of play out. So, the adventure, what I want to do here today is kind of give you a rundown of the adventure. It's 4 major parts. The adventure has 4 parts. And what I'm going to be working on here, mostly for the first several sessions, is just part 1 of the 4 parts of Wolfren's Fate. Which is the introductory adventure. So it's called Wolfren's Fate. So, I'll give you a bit of backstory here. The town of Wormbone wasn't always called Wormbone. It was, centuries ago called Ilsanvenir. It was an elven community in the middle of the Gemwood. At that point in time, the Gemwood kind of surrounded the entire settlement. And this was a place where the elves lived in the Icescar Valley back before, frankly, before there were dwarves here and before the humans even crossed over into Alnir. So the elves lived here, and they kind of used this valley as a summer retreat. So they mostly spent their time at the summer courts down in the south, but they would come here in the height of summer because it was cooler, because the heat was not as intense. And that's what Ilsanvenir was. But when Eventide finally hit, when it hit in 276, things changed. First of all, Eventide hit this community very hard. It was already kind of late in the season. Most of the elves had already left. So the community was not as big at this point in time. But when Eventide hit, the Icescar Valley was beset by a blizzard. The cold sunk the valley into the deepest cold, and as a result, Ilsanvenir had a lot of fatalities. They had a number of elves die because of the freezing cold in Eventide, right? Several weeks of eternal darkness is real bad when you're already up in a northern climate and it's already cold. So Ilsanvenir started to dwindle from that point forward and eventually was entirely abandoned. The community, this was about the time where the elves' birth rate started to plummet, and frankly, they just did not see the value of coming all the way up here anymore. So they just didn't, and Ilsanvenir was abandoned. Now, the dwarves were also up in the Icescar Valley at this point in time, but they never really settled in Ilsanvenir. So this was primarily an elven ruin. So when humans and goblins first returned to this valley, trying to settle it after kind of mostly being clustered further to the south, They did cross through here when they first arrived in the continent, but mostly they settled further to the south. Eventually, they came back up here and settled Ilsanvenir, creating a new town called Elf End. So Elf End existed for several hundred years, and they built in the Elven Ruins. They built a town outside of it. They cut down a lot of the gemwood around it, mainly to the south, to create farmland and for wood for homes. And Elf End was a bustling community. This was until 807 TD. In 807, a dragon came to town, came flying out of the mountains to the north. It came and settled on the town and, frankly, caused massive devastation. Fiery breath burnt down a good half of the town before the militia could even really rally. And during the panic and the kind of chaos, it settled in the center of town, in kind of the oldest part of town. And there, in that part of town, amidst the old elven ruins, was a tower that belonged to an aging wizard named Wolfren. Now, this dragon landed on Wolfren's tower and began tearing it apart with its claws and fangs, just ripping stones and tossing them through the air. But before it could do much damage, parts of the tower were collapsing. Before it could get all the way to the bottom, it kind of just let out a mournful howl and died. Nobody hit it. Nobody threw a spell at it. Nobody shot it with arrows. It just died. It just draped over the tower and died. Well, the town was too busy trying to put out the fires and saving people from the raging dragon flames that were consuming the southern half of town to really care over much as to why the dragon suddenly just died. So they didn't really investigate until later that day, when they finally approached the beast just to make sure it wasn't taking a breather. And they found it dead. And in the following days, its flesh just kind of rotted off of its body, almost faster than it should have, leaving behind a petrified skeleton. And this skeleton has remained there to this day, draped over the ruins of Wolfren's tower. So Wolfren's tower was a multi-story kind of just, wizard tower. And the top stories were all demolished. All that was left was kind of the first story was mostly still intact. First floor, the ground level. And chunks of the second floor were still there, but the dragon had kind of crushed them. There were chunks of stone, and they removed a lot of the stone, but they couldn't remove the dragon's skeleton. As it turns out, when it petrified, it kind of locked into place, and they couldn't move it. Now, this wasn't a huge deal, except for the fact that its wing was draped over the side in such a way that they couldn't open up the door to Wolfren's tower. His first floor was still relatively intact, but the door was the only way in. There were no windows. And as a result, they just kind of left it. They listened, they posted guards, hoping that maybe Wolfren was still alive. Wolfren had not been seen that day, so it was assumed that he was inside his tower. But he was never heard from again. So, flash forward to today. It has been 300 years. The dragon skeleton has been sitting there. The town, which was called Elf End, eventually became known as Wormbone because of the dragon skeleton draped over the tower in the center of town. And that leads us to today. The start of this adventure, Wolfren's fate, is the day where all of a sudden, out of the blue, the dragon's wing collapses. The bones have, over time, some have broken and fallen off just because of natural occurrences. No one can force them off, but they appear to break and corrode over time. They've slowly worn down. And the wing bone, one of the wing bones collapses, freeing the front door. This sets off a firestorm of activity as the town tries to decide what to do now that they can finally get access to Wolfren's tower after 300 years of it being seen. That's the start of the adventure. The start is the players, being desperate for coin, get grouped up to go into Wolfren's tower. There's a whole bunch of groups. As a matter of fact, there's 3 that are formed. The players are only one of them. Now, by luck of the draw, the town council decides, hey, this could be really dangerous. Understand, you're taking your life into your own hands. And we also reserve the right to buy anything from you that you recover from the tower, because it may be of important historical significance. But they assume at this point that Wolfren's dead. And they don't just want to send guards in there, because it might be filled with traps and monsters and stuff. So they're like, Are there any adventurers who want to go in? And that's where the players come in. So that leads us into part 1 of Wolfren's Fate, which is called The Wizard's Home. And what this is a journey inside of the tower. And the way this works is the adventure itself is divided up into a number of spaces. And the players get to go in first. By luck of the draw, the players are the first in. There are 2 other groups. One is kind of a bumbling bunch of misadventurers, and the other one's a cutthroat group of mercenaries. And the cutthroat mercenaries are second, and the bumbling adventurers are third. Now, the players might be a second group of bumbling adventurers, but I guess we'll find out. So they get their first choice of where to go into the tower, because as they enter it, they find that they're in the wizard's living spaces. And lo and behold, it's much bigger than it appears on the outside. The tower itself is not incredibly large. As a matter of fact, let's go back to that map, because the map is where this all starts. So this is the map of the square where Wolfren's tower is. You can see the tower there with the shadow of the dragon skeleton kind of over the middle of it. To the south here, we've got a tavern. One of the taverns mentioned in the player's guide. I think it's called Black Arch. Oh, what's the name of that? I always forget. So there is the... It is called the Stonefang Tavern. So this is the Stonefang Tavern there on the south. The museum is over on one side of this square, and the blacksmith shop is also on this map as well. So there's a handful of sites from the player's guide actually on this map. But the tower is there in the middle, and as you can see, it's not a very large tower, right? I mean, it's, you know, a grand total of 30 feet in diameter, but the inside is actually significantly larger than it appears. There's an entire floor there. And what's actually happening is when you pass through the front door, you're actually taken down beneath the streets of Wormbone to where his lair actually. So sealed kind of chambers down below. And you are taken down into the first level. And this is where the first part of the adventure takes place. So the way it's going to work is the players get to choose where to go first. And the first room is obvious. They have to kind of go through the foyer into the main. But once they're in the main room, they get their choice of what direction to go first. The other groups will pick behind them. And the order in which they go into the rooms will make a difference, because they might lose out opportunities to get certain treasure. They might have to face certain monsters if they go in first. There's all sorts of things that may or may not happen depending on which group goes in first, which group goes in second, which group goes in third. So the entire thing is kind of this complicated rubric of rooms with what you encounter there based on when you go into it. So there's obviously the study, the kind of entry room where you go in. But off of that is the dining room that leads to a kitchen. There's a library that leads to a kind of a private meeting room or study. Then there's kind of some of the back chambers that lead to storage and stuff. So they've got their choice of where they want to go, and they can kind of make the call as to where they go first. The players will always get the first choice, but wherever they go, it will dictate where the other groups go, because they follow kind of an order. So the first bit is them just trying to explore this place, and naturally there are dangers here. The wizard had a number of conveniences built into his tower that were designed to make things pleasant, to clean up after folks, to serve food, to cook and prepare food, to put things away. And many of these have run kind of amok. To top it off, there's also kind of a spiritual guardian construct thing, the Major Domo, whose job it is to open the door and let people in. And this poor entity has been stuck in here for 300 years with no one to talk to. So it's not doing too well. And in fact, it is the key to this entire dungeon. So, or at least this floor of the dungeon. So the real secret here is not about what they can find on this floor. It's about finding the way off of this floor. That's the trick to part one of the adventure. So the way to find your way off of this floor is to satisfy the Major Domo, because the Major Domo is the only one who has the key. The key that opens up the secret staircase that leads down to the vault. Now, normally, Wolfren would have used the lift to get there. There was basically magical conveyance to get there, but that's long since broken down. The players cannot use that. But there is a staircase just hidden, and only the Major Domo has a key. So, to make the Major Domo happy, you have to go to all the various different rooms and do the thing that the Major Domo wants done there. Once all those things are done, the Major Domo will finally calm and help you. The other groups aren't going to do this, but the players might. So, that's the kind of thrust of part 1, is that with all of those things done, they can finally put the spirit of the Major Domo at ease, and they can get to the lower level of Wolfren's complex. That's part 1 of the adventure. So they're going to be dealing with things like animated brooms and low-level threats, books that fly around on their own to try and put themselves back in place. The kitchen itself is going to be filled with dangers, as there is going to be an angry, furnace fireplace that's going to shoot flames at them. It's going to be lots of fun little construct-y kind of things. It's mostly inanimate objects and spirits and things like that here in the first bit of this dungeon. So that's the end of part 1. But where do we go from there? There's 3 other parts to this adventure. Part 2, which I don't actually think I'm going to get to for several weeks. So what I'm working on right now is getting that part 1 finished. And frankly, I may not be able to get every aspect of it detailed by Thursday, but we're going to try. The draft of it may not quite be ready for prime time. It may take me another week to get it ready to share with all of you, because I want to make sure that it's nice and polished. But that's what I'm aiming for, is everything I just talked about. That's part 1. I want to get that all in a document, but it's going to take some time. I've got groups to design, I've got encounters to design, and I need to make sure I have minimum viability by Thursday. So, working hard. So that leads us to part 2 of the adventure. I don't think I'm going to get to this for several weeks, if not a month or 2. But that gets us to part 2, which I'm calling Wolfren's Ring. So when they get down to the next floor, they get down to the vault, and beneath that they get to Wolfren's kind of private library, filled with ancient books and treatises and, displays of odd magical things that he has encountered. And for the PCs, in a world where magic is not nearly as common, this place is like a candy store, filled with magical things and objects that Wolfren collected before he died. Now, there's a doorway leading out of this library that leads into, like, the laboratory, the main vault area. The problem is there is a barrier blocking the way. And the only way to open that is with Wolfren's signet ring. Now, Wolfren's nowhere to be found. At least, not yet. When they approach the door to the vault, they can see kind of through it, and in the vault itself, in the middle of his main laboratory, in a cascading, shimmering field of magical energy, is Wolfren. And he appears to be in stasis. Maybe alive, maybe not alive. He was apparently trapped in here, just like, just as the town was trapped from getting inside, he was trapped from getting out. And he was apparently able to put himself in some sort of slumber, at least. So he may be alive, he may not be alive. The players don't know yet, but they can't get to him because the vault doorway is sealed. So they have to find Wolfren's signet ring. And at this point in time, their time in the dungeon is over. I suspect that they may have to rest once or twice before the end of this, maybe only once, but I still think it's going to take several sessions to kind of clear out the upper floor, figure out what the Major Domo wants, and make it down here. So the very start of part 2 is them kind of exploring a little bit more, but then kind of running into a roadblock. And figuring out a way through that roadblock is going to take some effort, because they need to find Wolfren's signet ring. There isn't one in the tower. So the obvious thing would to maybe go check the museum, which is right outside. There is this museum dedicated to Wolfren. So they may be able to go there. They may think to go there. But ultimately, at this point, the adventure kind of opens up and becomes not quite a sandbox, but certainly becomes kind of a web of decisions as the players, if they, seek to continue to find a way deeper and deeper into Wolfren's laboratory, they're going to need to find this signet ring. So there's a number of different things that they can do at this point in time, and this leads back to the Player's Gazetteer, where there are a number of locations that might be of interest to them. Now, on the upside, the owner of the museum, Hadram, can point them in a few directions. And these are the big points that I have here. By the time I get to this, I'll probably throw a few red herrings in here as well to get them to explore more of the town. But there are 3 primary locations that they need to visit. Again, I'll throw some red herrings in. These are the important ones. The 3 locations are the Teetering Tower, the House of Order, and the Skygaze Inn. The reasons for each is a little different. So the Teetering Tower is kind of this old esoteric bookshop that also has a bunch of strange bits of memorabilia in, and odd magic items in cases. The ring is not there, but the bookshop will be an important part of their exploration later. The most important place that they need to go is the Skygaze Inn. Now, the reason why Hadram tells them to go there is because the Skygaze Inn has been here for a long time, and it's said that Wolfren used to visit there quite frequently. So if they go there, the owners of the Skygaze Inn are elves, and the elder remembers Wolfren. Or rather, I think, I'm trying to remember exactly how this goes. I think it's their parents that will remember Wolfren. And they can look through the old records and notes of the Skygaze Inn to learn that Wolfren did stay here quite frequently. He would stay there overnight with some frequency when he wanted to study various astrological phenomenon, because the Skygaze Inn is built in an old elven observatory, but now it's a restaurant and inn, and you can rent the high table, which is where the scope of the telescope comes down to, which allows you to use the ancient telescope to look up at the sky. Wolfren used to do this with some frequency as part of his studies, so he stayed there quite often. And in the ancient ledgers of the Skygaze Inn, there is a note that after Wolfren disappeared, his room was eventually cleared out and everything was put in a box. That box was delivered to Wolfren's brother, or given to Wolfren's brother, who came by and collected his effects. Now, this leads them down a bunch of possible choices, but now they know that Wolfren had a brother. The next thing is to lead them to the House of Order. This is the Church to Valanav, the highly organized Church of Valanav in town. The players are going to have to go at the right time and follow the right ritual to speak to the High Priest of Valanav. And he maintains all of the birth records for the entire town. And he will be able to look into the genealogy of Wolfren and determine that there was indeed a brother. They can find his name this way. They can also come to the realization that the brother never lived in Wormbone. There's no trace of this brother having any children or descendants, and no record is ever on file of where he lived or whether or not he married anyone. So the brother didn't live here, but now they're left with the question of, where did the brother live? Where did the brother go to? The brother came, picked up Wolfren's personal effects, which they can only hope had a signet ring in it, and took them somewhere. Where? Who knows? This leads us full circle all the way back to the Teetering Tower. If they go to the Teetering Tower or are looking up the brother, they can find a note. Not a note, sorry, they can find a book written by the brother. The brother was into horticulture and wrote a book on horticulture, and the book specifically mentions and talks and studies the plants and native flora and fauna of the gemwood and the area around Red Thistle. So the brother lived in Red. That, once they figure all that out, all of those misadventures, and throughout all this, by the way, they're going to be hounded by the other 2 groups who are also going to be trying to solve this riddle. Right, so you got the bumbling other groups. I've set up the other 2 adventuring groups as foils throughout this. You've got one that's pretty cutthroat and is willing to fight or do dastardly things to stop the party. And then you've got the other group, which is frankly kind of more comic relief and bumbling, but will prove now and again to be a threat as they also solve things. These other 2 groups are also here just in case the players get stuck. So if the players get stuck, one of the things I like to do with mysteries is if I find myself in a place where the players are stuck, I like to be able to give them a way forward. But in this case, if they get stuck, they find the way forward by one of the other groups getting to it first. So then it becomes more of a challenge. And there's going to be, in this part of the adventure, there's going to be ways that say, you know, the group of cutthroat mercenaries may buy the horticultural book, preventing the players from having access to it if they get to that first. This will then lead to the players needing to either steal it from them or follow them as they leave town to head to Red Thistle. That leads to part 3 of the adventure. So part 2 is an urban exploration mystery solving adventure. Part of the adventure. I don't think it'll be terribly long, but it is a little open-ended, and at this point in time, I will probably slot in 1 or 2 character-driven narrative pieces that involve players' backstories. So one of the things that I'm making sure to do with this adventure is to leave it open-ended to the point where I can slot in, you know, oh, you've got some drama with a relative. Oh, you've got something weird with a book. I want to make sure that there are spots in this adventure where I can put those things in and we can explore. All right. So that leads to part 3. Part 3 is the Red Thistle errand. This requires the PCs to travel to Red Thistle. Doing so, if you've seen the map, and I don't know that I have it available. Let me see if I can bring up the map real quickly here. Maps. Let me pop over to Gar Valley tagged map. There it is. So let me go ahead and move this into place because it's a little out of place. So as you can see, the players are going to start here in Wormbone, which is kind of in the center of the map. And they're going to need to travel to Red Thistle, which is over to the east through the Gemwood. So that's where the adventure is going to take them. They're going to need to travel through the Gemwood to reach Red Thistle. Now, Red Thistle is a smaller community. It's mostly agrarian. It's filled with a lot of shepherds who, you know, in the winter bring all their flocks home to the area around Red Thistle. In the summer, they spend most of their time out in the fields to the east of Red Thistle, kind of out between Red Thistle and the Ashen Barrows. They don't go as far as the Ashen Barrows. They tend to stay in that kind of empty valley there between Red Thistle and the Ashen Barrows. So, that's where they are in the summer, but this adventure takes place in fall. So they are home, and the players are able to go and travel there. Now, I'm thinking that as we get further and further into this adventure, by the way, you're getting more into what I would like to say is a lot more loose notes. This is how I designed adventures. So my adventurers have all their main plot beats put down. But when I get to the individual components, they get a lot looser the further away I am from them. So you're going to get to see that happen in real time. Spoilers here, I don't meticulously plan out every part of it. I kind of leave some of the future parts a little nebulous so that I can alter and adjust them based on feedback and experience playing the earlier part. So this Red Thistle part, I think, is going to involve a journey there, which is going to involve traveling through the Gemwood for the first time. And one of the things I really want to make sure happens there, to just give them a sense of the world, is have them have some hijinks in some old elven ruins. Because there are elven ruins kind of throughout the Gemwood, and some of them are kind of haunted or have weird things that happen at various points of the year. And I want them to have some kind of misadventure with something like that. Maybe some ghosts, maybe some monsters. You know, there's plenty of chances for them to deal with kind of wild creatures and animals and beasts in this part of the adventure. And I think that they should. So there'll be something like that on their way there, but when they arrive in Red Thistle, they'll get to find the descendants of Wolfren's brother. Wolfren's brother has long since passed away. It was 300 years. Human, so he's long dead. But they can find his family, and his family has the old box filled with Wolfren's old stuff in it. And they do indeed have a old signet ring that belongs to Wolfren. So they have the thing that the players need. But they're not just going to give it to him. I think that this is an old family heirloom that, you know, if it has some value, then they could use some help. And as it turns out, the family business is, you know, securing cattle, and they've been having trouble with some monsters preying on their cattle. I think there's a very easy plot piece here where the players have to help the descendants of Wolfren to get to borrow this signet ring. So I think that's the main thrust of this part of the adventure. I think we're going to have the other two groups coming and causing mischief and mayhem during this time as well. So, you know, plenty of opportunities here for fun and hijinks as they go to Red Thistle and... So, that's part 3 of the adventure. Part 3 concludes with them making their way back to Wormbone. They don't have to take the same way back. They can travel via river raft that makes its way from Red Thistle to Wormbone on the regular basis. So they can get home that way if they want. There isn't one available going the other way. It's going upriver that way. So, but there are occasional rafts made, and mostly they're made by timber that they cut down, and then they just disassemble the raft in Wormbone and use it. But, you know, it is a way for them to float things down back to town. So they may get a river raft ride back on the way. So, the point here is to give them a chance to kind of explore, do some wilderness exploration. We've already had some urban dungeon exploration, some urban puzzle solving, plenty of chances to roleplay with a bunch of these. And then we get to the final part of the adventure, which is just called the Wizard's Vault. And with this, with Ring in Hand, they are now finally able to get into Wolfren's vault, where the old wizard is still hanging out in suspended animation, basically in a permanent sleep. So the players can then get into that. They have to deal with some remaining servants whose job it was to make sure that Wolfren did not wake. They maintained the wards, and those instructions have been corrupted over the years, and now they just try and keep the wizard asleep permanently. And when the players try to wake him up, they see them as threats. So the players get to deal with another bevy of constructs and magical wards, protecting the wizard, making sure that he remains. After dealing with all of those, the players can finally do the necessary ritual to wake Wolfren, and this requires them to travel throughout the vaults and collect the right ingredients. There's going to be some puzzle solving here to get the right ingredients, get the right components to wake Wolfren from his slumber. So, this gets them to the very end of the adventure. The very end of Wolfren's fate is the players revive poor Wolfren, who's been asleep for 300. And that is kind of where the adventure comes to an end. But it leaves it open for a bunch of different exploration, because Wolfren was a student trying to unravel the 7 truths. That is his entire thing. And throughout this adventure, there's going to be some hints and clues, and the players are actually going to see the first truth before they even reach Wolfren. It's in his library. So at the end of part 1, the players find the first truth. They find a copy of the letter that was sent by the scholar Arvanis that actually speaks the first truth when he was first starting his research into the events of Eventide. So the players are going to get experience with the mystery of the 7 truths. They are going to learn a bit about the town. They're going to learn about the movers and shakers in town. They're going to be able to travel to a number of the locations in the player's guide. They're going to get to be able to meet a bunch of NPCs. They're going to establish some rivals. They're going to explore the wilderness. They're going to have some wilderness encounters. They're going to have more social encounters. We're going to have more wilderness encounters. Then we're going to come back to wrap it up with one last bit of dungeon crawling and puzzle solving. That is the complete first adventure. That's it. So I am busy writing this as quickly as my fingers will let me type. So that's what we've been doing. That is kind of the complete synopsis of Wolfren's fate. I am super excited to be bringing this adventure to all of you. And the way this is going to work is over the coming weeks and months, I am going to be releasing this adventure as I write it. So right now I'm working on the Wizard's Home. I have a map that I'm working on. I have encounters that I'm building. Right now these are in very light sketch form. I'm going to be playtesting them starting this coming Thursday. The first session is this Thursday. The session with the other group is the following Wednesday. Normally it'll be on Monday, but I've got a conflict. So the first session of Group B, Group A and Group B, Group B will be the following Wednesday. But after that, the week after that, there'll be a game session on Thursday. Then over the weekend, then the following Monday. So every 2 weeks, each group plays once. The way it's going to work is I'm going to use that playtest to help refine the adventure, and as I refine it, I'm going to release the parts to you. So you will get the Wizard's Home, the first part of Wolfren's Fate, maps, story pieces, encounter locations, details on the rival adventuring groups, all that stuff. You will get all of that probably sometime this month. My goal is to have that ready and able to be delivered by the end of the month. I think it's probably pretty doable. I think we have, a little bit of extra time here, by the way, today. So if folks want to ask any questions or ask about the adventure or what it might contain, feel free to queue those up and throw those at me. So we got that going on. I just wanted to give you that warning as I continue talking about what is going to happen here. So I think the Wizard's Home is actually going to take me several sessions to wrap up. I'm only playing 3 hours a week, and only once every 2 weeks with each group. So I would suspect that the first part with its, 6 or 7 encounters, honestly, will probably take 3 sessions to wrap fully. That means it's going to actually take me a month and a half because each group only plays 2 sessions a month. So that means Wizard's Home will not wrap for my group until probably mid-May. But throughout that point in time, especially after the first piece written, I'm going to start writing the second piece right away. So I'm hoping to get to a point where when I start the pieces, I'm ready to deliver them to you. I just think here at the early going, it's going to be a little tight. I have to focus on getting the game ready to play and not ready to present. That level of polish will have to work. So yeah, that's what we got going on. That is what Wolfren's Fate is all about. Now, beyond Wolfren's Fate, if I look beyond this, what do I see happening after this? Wolfren's Fate, the entire point here is to establish Wolfren as a important NPC. The players basically free Wolfren from his eternal slumber, and Wolfren can then be kind of a quest giver to the PC as he relearns history, and there's plenty of time for him to kind of just be like, I need to get caught up on history. Go do your own thing for a few weeks. I'll call you if I need you. And Wolfren's going to be, the standard kind of curmudgeon-y thing. Perhaps quirky and paranoid is the way I think I'm going to play him, because he is one of the folks who's focused on these 7 truths, so he's a little twitchy. But beyond that, there's so much that he has to offer, right? In that he can send them to various places to help learn more about the 7 truths. His research on it was just getting started when the dragon showed up and attacked. So he himself, has more research to do, including sending the PCs eventually to Arnathis to go to the libraries there to pick up research for him. There are also forces in this world that are not going to want him to succeed, and some of those might start rearing their ugly head to kind of bring the players deeper into this mystery. And then to top it off, Wolfren's entire complex sits on top of even older elven ruins that are buried deep beneath the town of Wormbone. The only challenge with those is they can only be opened and accessed at certain times of the year. So they have these weird calendar doors. They were created by the Cenazar elves, and only the doors to enter them only open at certain times of the year, so the players cannot access them readily. So it's funny, the story of Wolfren's Fate is there to introduce the players to one another and set them on the paths of this adventure. But it's also there to introduce them and cement one of the key NPCs in the world. Starts out as a mystery, someone that they don't know whether or not. So yeah, my hope for this, there's a comment here about being excited about the timing on this. My hope for this is that some of you will run this as well. I would love to get more feedback on the adventure, right? I don't think anything we do as part of this Patreon is going to be final until eventually it becomes a PDF and becomes printed, right? I think one of the next steps for this project, beyond kind of getting the content out there, is spending some time getting it developed, getting it edited, getting more art. I have art that is in progress. I'm hoping to see some sketches maybe as early as this coming week. I am super excited about that. I may see sketches this week or next week. And then, you know, get it with a professional layout and things like that and get it ready to be produced, right? Everyone who is a Patreon backer will get the PDF at either half price or free. As a matter of fact, everyone in this who can view this stream will be getting it for free because you have to be on the $10 or higher level. All of those folks will get all of the PDF. But I also want to make sure I do this print on demand and make it available for folks to get a physical copy as well. So, you know, but that is still a bit further away. I'm hoping that maybe by the end of summer, we can be maybe looking to do a physical copy of the player's guide. That would be really exciting. That's kind of a big goal. But I'm working solo here, so I don't have a huge team with me, so I have to pay freelancers. So, you know, it's a process. But I think Wolfren's Fate would make a perfect companion piece. Do the player's guide, the GM's guide, and then Wolfren's Fate. So that does bring me to the other thing that's going to start spinning up here relatively soon is the GM's guide. So right now, everything's been going into the player's guide. You'll notice there's an entire tab on the website for the GM's guide. That's where the adventure is going to live. But that is also where all of the GM information is going to be. And I haven't been filling that out yet because I've been focused on getting material to my players. So, you know, one step at a time. A lot of the GM stuff is in notes and stuff. I have a lot of it written. I just didn't have time to make it into website material. So that'll be happening here in the coming days and weeks. I'm excited to get that stuff out to all of. So if anybody has any last minute questions here, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we might wrap this one a little early. I'm sorry, we had a bit of a late start today because of a emergency here at home that needed to be taken care of, and I really should go check in on it before I start my next stream. So I may wrap this one just a hair early here today, but if anybody has any last minute questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm also really excited because this is the first stream that we've done now that the Patreon is actually funded. I didn't charge for the month of March, so April's the first month that it has charged. So everyone who is in the credits here are people who contributed to the campaign. Those credits will now lock in place for the month of April, and they will change again in May based on your continued support. So I'm excited about that. I may actually get to a point where I release a handful of these videos in public just to give them a bigger sense as to what is up to, but I want to make sure everybody here has a chance to view videos in full first and get a good sense. So you guys, as the patrons, you'll always get everything first. That's kind of my big. But I think, you know, one thing that I'm eager to do is bring more people into the fold. Right? I got to thank all of you for being here. You are the reason I am doing this. You are helping to motivate me and helping, frankly, to foot some of the rather expensive costs needed to make RPG products. They're not cheap, as it turns out. I've spent $1,900 on art, and I've only got 4 pieces coming. So it's pretty pricey, pretty quick. I'm excited to do it because I really want to share this world with all of you. And you're all helping to make it. So if you got friends, if you got other fellow gamers who might be interested in this, let them know. You know, you can get involved for as little as $5 a month. I mean, to be honest, you can get involved for $1 a month, but $5 really is the minimum where you can kind of get all of the content. You just get it at a slightly slow. You know, so the more the merrier. The more folks we have, the more time I have and more freelance projects I can pass on because this is helping to support Eventide and making that. So I want to thank you all for that. This is kind of the first stream after we've actually hit that milestone, so I'm pretty excited about it. Well, folks, I don't really see any other questions about Wolfren's Fate. I hope you are all excited about this adventure. I'm going to be starting to run the first part of it here on Thursday, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this one just a hair early here today, and we are going to pick this back up. On Tuesday, I hope you will join me at 7 p.m. Pacific time, right back here on YouTube. I'll post a link in the Patreon. On Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, we'll be taking a deeper dive into the first part of the adventure. So I'll be showing off the maps, which have to be done by then, and I'll be showing off some of the early encounters and stuff like that, some of the things that you can actually expect to see in that first adventure. And assuming all goes according to plan, I may actually even be able to talk about that first adventuring party as well, to talk about their basic makeup and composition, and we can all place bets as to whether or not they're going to die. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. All right, thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. We will see you this coming Tuesday. Thank you for watching, and thank you for supporting this Patreon.